Okay. There we go. I had a little bit of technical difficulties there for just a second. It's all good in the hood. Anyway, hi, how you doing? Welcome to Warhammer 40k and lore and me streaming. Isn't that neat? I think it's pretty neat, actually. I rather enjoy that sort of thing. So I've decided to come on here and talk about it for a little bit, and yeah, why not? You know, one of the things that I've noticed about me is, like, the longer I look at 40k lore, the more I'm like, I want to be, like, able to be in this universe and, you know, like the people I'm around and like the ideas that are being presented and things like that. And I was trying to think of, you know, what the best way to go about that would be. And I part of me thinks that it's a really good idea to be like, you know, oh, hey, what if we made more positive things in 40k? What if we took the Chaos Gods and made them positive? What if we, you know, took some Space Marines and made, like, a Space Marine... Oh. What if we took some Space Marines and made Space Marines that were, like, more, to my liking and stuff like that? You know, and that's just kind of what I'm really doing. For a lot of things, I'm just sort of finding versions of those things that I like and am willing to tolerate the things that I dislike, or, you know, like, basically writing a better story. The reason I like 40k is because it's a universe where you can kind of set up and make your own thing really easily, and it feels like you're making stuff that's interesting, and it feels like you're, you know, expanding the lore, and, like, the lore is so crazy that you can kind of do a lot of different things and still get to a point. Oh my goodness. Here, thank you. And still get to a point where you, like, understand, like, okay, well, we blew that up. I kind of thought that might help, but now I'm realizing that didn't actually do... well, anything, really. Why is this guy skinned? That's crazy. It's okay if we make them into small enough meat chunks. No one will recognize them. And then who's gonna get upset, huh? Huh? Yeah. I've also kind of sometimes felt like Viscera cleanup detail is the sort of job that you could probably have in, like, a Warhammer 40k setting. Like, where you would just be like, you know, yeah, there's a bunch of corpses over there. I gotta go in the... ooh, box. I gotta go in the, you know, move them around. But, you know, hey, what it is what it is. And I've been, you know, kind of going back and forth, specifically with the idea of the Primarchs, and trying to figure out which one of them is, like, my absolute favorite, but also which one is, like, the one that is absolutely bottom of the barrel for me. Now, ultimately, God loves all of them, so I have to love all of them, even the ones that I personally find repulsive and things like that. I have to at least try, you know? So... you know, I can see, like, how Kurz was kind of cursed, and, like, it's not entirely his fault, but that doesn't really excuse all the stuff he does and all the places he's been and all the messed up stuff he's done. I mean, simply put, the Emperor probably should have, like, you don't normally want to euthanize peoples and things, but sometimes you meet a creature that is so vile that I'm not 100% sure what the other option is. But it kind of seems like the Emperor is, you know, once again, Dad of the Year. Oh. There you go. Is once again Dad of the Year by making sure that all of his kids have good reasons to hate him, not just, you know, not just the normal teenage phase of, well, Dad, I got learned it from you, but more like, you know, actual, wow, why did you ruin all of this for me just kinda cuz? I mean, I think people tend to forget that, like, he was kind of hanging around for, like, you know, several hundred years. Just kind of letting them do their thing. Well, I mean, I think it's close to 200, but you know, like, for instance, Lorgar was going around preaching the word of the Emperor for, like, 100 years. So he's more like 100. But, before Monarchia. And at that point, you know, what exactly did the Emperor expect to have happen? I mean, if you make everything difficult for your son, or like you basically don't tell your son to actually stop worshiping you, but then you're like, oh man, I'm so tired of this, and this is the only way to get through to him. It's like, yeah, I suppose I could kind of understand, like, why you might think this is the only way to get through to him if he's that fundamental in his like objection to you saying that you're not a god and all that. I get it, but at the same time, it's like, then why did you give him a legion? If you didn't want him to do all these things, why did you give him a legion? He doesn't even talk about it like he wants to be, like, you know, one of your generals. He wants to be a philosopher. He wants to be someone who makes people's lives better, and then you just show up and make everything bad. But the Emperor is just kind of does that over and over again, really. It's like one of the things that's like actually bad about the Horus Heresy existing as a book series is that the Emperor is just kind of a butt munch, you know? And the thing about the Emperor being a bit of a butt munch is that, like, he's one of the central protagonists of the whole diggity darn thing. So it's kind of difficult to like the Imperium at all when you realize, oh wait, it was all founded on this guy's ideas. And yes, they are corrupted over time now, but yeah, they're still just kind of bad ideas. You know, what is that one Death Grip song? Giving good ideas to bad people, or I give good ideas to bad people, or something like that. Hi. And, you know, sometimes you just kind of start to realize that you don't really want to have a character that's just like, you know, a really big butt munch. I mean, that's kind of the thing with the Emperor, is that the Emperor is just like such a big butt munch. It's kind of hard to ever get to a point of like forgiving him and like being able to look past those things. But, you know, like I said, you know, you gotta love everybody because God loves everybody. So you gotta try. So, like, I would try to reason with the Emperor and try to get him to understand that, you know, all these things he's doing, although he thinks he's doing them, you know, to help, and he thinks he's doing these things so that people will, you know, have better lives, and maybe he is doing that, but I don't know. That almost sounds like an excuse at a certain point. It just starts to seem like he really doesn't know what else to do with himself other than be a huge, horrible warlord dictator, right? Like, it seems like he's trying not to do that, but then, like, every time I find out something new about his backstory, it's just like, oh, hey, there's another instance of him just being kind of whack, weird, and odd, and things like that. And it just kind of makes me think, well, maybe it's not worth it to try and, like, redeem the Emperor, try to make sense. Oh, dang it. Or try to make sense of what the Emperor talks about and all the things he says that he wants to do, because ultimately those plans, from the little bit we get of the perspective of the Emperor, like in the Horus Heresy books, he seems like he's kind of so beyond us in a way that he doesn't even really understand basic human emotions in the right way. He's like an alien in a strange land trying to, like, force people to see things the way he sees them, and I just don't think it ever really works out. You know? I think he just wants to really forge the galaxy in a certain shape. I think he is one of those kind of people that thinks he is right, and if you talk to him about it, the only thing he'll tell you about is, you know, why he's right, why he wants to explore what he's doing, why he wants to keep up what he's doing, why he wants to go through all these possibilities and come back to these things. But you know, then I think about like what we do to earn redemption, and I think about how we, you know, one of the first things you got to do is realize that you want to serve others. You know, you got to realize that you want to make lives of other people around you better, and that's like one of the most satisfying things. And the simple truth is that the Emperor doesn't really seem to care that much about other people's lives. He seems to view everybody as a tool to get them down towards what he sees as a better future. And the one thing about the Emperor trying to make everything like a better future is that, like, it's only from his perspective, and he's only doing all this stuff from a perspective that he thinks makes sense. But he ignores, like, all the people who are suffering. He ignores how much suffering he's causing, because he's like, oh, well, ultimately I created a situation in which the best of humanity, or the quote he calls the best of humanity, has the best chance to flourish. And it's like, I don't really think that was ever once what is actually accomplished. You can kind of sort of see it the longer you go down the rabbit hole, that there's just a lot of things that the Emperor does which don't really make any sense if he's trying to make people's lives better. If he's actually trying to make people's lives better, why are there so many, like, homeless people and outcasts in Outcast Dead? Why are there so many people that are going around, like, having to deal with gangs in the in the shadow of the Imperial Palace? You would think that if the Imperial Palace was like the center of, like, where all this good stuff is supposed to be happening, you wouldn't just be building, like, all these glorious monuments and stuff like that. You would be, you know, making it so that the achievements of humanity could be shared with all, and that and that more people could be able to come back and, you know, have better lives in your Imperium. They would be able to travel forward and be able to explore and be able to get out there. But, I mean, just like every other empire, he's founded on, you know... I almost tipped over the bucket again. It's founded on, burn. It's founded on all these terrible versions of the future. It's founded on the idea that everything has to go a certain way, and specifically his way, and it's just... he's not even good at it. He's pretty bad at it, actually. Seems like he's really bad at convincing people to take his side and pretty much anything. He just kind of seems like he has no idea what he really wants to do or why he's doing what he's doing. And at a certain point, it just turns into, oh, well, the writing is kind of bad. The writing just makes it seem like ultimately, no matter, like, what you say at this point, there's too many bad things done. Like, there are so many books, and, you know, the Emperor is kind of like one of the main, like, antagonists or protagonists of the whole series, and you need to realize that almost everything is just like, oh, he did something so fundamentally stupid and so against, like, human nature that it's almost hard to imagine how you could get there unless you're like a psychopath or like you're just crazy. And I think this is like kind of one of the biggest problems. Like, you know, one of your main factions is just... it kind of reminds people too much of the Nazis. And I think that's kind of like the joke in certain ways. Oh my goodness. I have no idea what happened to that. But that's one of the things that really makes it difficult, is that like I want to find someone that seems like they're doing something for the galaxy that isn't just A, for selfish gain, and B, has like any sort of nobility to it. And I think the Tau and some of the Eldar both really kind of get into that and why what they do is better. I mean, I think the Iyanden is one of the best craft worlds and really has a great vibe going on for that reason. I like that Iyanden is so different in a way, and is so willing to try and make peace with the Imperium and try to go out of their ways to make things work and stuff like that. And it's like, I can see why they are so cool, and I like that a lot. And I mean, sometimes I think back to like Eldrad, and I think about all of this like convoluted stuff about like prophecy and things like that. And eventually I just think, well, you know, there's prophecy and then there's like living in the world, man. Sometimes you have to just like go out and actually do things. Sometimes you just gotta like make choices and go places. Like stagnation, for the sense of stagnation, I just don't think really helps people out very much. I mean, but that's, you know, kind of just like, I guess, my opinion, man. And, you know, stuff like that. You start to think, but wait a minute, what am I doing? Why am I doing the things I'm doing around me? And stuff like that. Instead of going forth and just doing you know what's important and why it's important, and focusing on what you want to change in the world. It's like, you know, if you're like an Eldar, for instance, like you could sit around all day going, oh man, I'm doomed, everything's doomed. It's like, sure, you could do that, but that's boring. There's no reason to just sit there and wallow in the mire of distrust and things like that. If you're an Eldar, you should go out there and make sure that you're doing the best you possibly can. To look into the eye of terror and all of these other things and be like, okay, look, I gotta try and do something about this. You gotta, like, 65 million years of an empire is enough time, I would think, to develop some pretty nutty weapons and be able to do some pretty nutty things, right? Like, you can't just be completely unwilling to advance as a society, and you can't be willing to like just completely ignore all this junk. Sometimes you have to be willing to actually go out of your way and actually, you know, invest in time and effort to do things. That's part of the reason, like, I like Ulthway for all of the like psychic stuff, but the constant like, oh, everything sucks, oh my god, look at all these terrible futures, it's just kind of, I don't know, boring. Like, yeah, the future can be terrible, but, well, ultimately, we are the ones that are going to make that future one way or the other. So we simply put can't. There we go. It's a durable furnace. Okay. We want to make sure that we're able to create a new and better and brighter future. Actually, part of the reason I like the Eldar is because I kind of think just like taking the Eldar technology and taking it away from the Eldar themselves, and then making a new thing out of all of that difficulty, you know? Making a new thing out of all the difficulty that happens to you. Like, if you're an Eldar, you have all this technology, you have all this time to live and grow and be, and I think you could really make some good use out of it. And then if you take that technology that the Eldar have and you give it to like some humans that are hopeful, I think you can do some really good stuff. I mean, you can see in things like the Interrex that the Imperium is not the only like way to go about things. That there were these civilizations that were working with Xenos and working with various other peoples to, you know, advance and do better off and do better things and grow as like a society. And the Interrex were a great example of that. The simple truth is that the Imperium... I'm silly. The simple truth is that the Imperium is so militaristic and kind of, in a sense, so vile to its very nature that it's... Of course you wouldn't trust the Imperium with your technology. Of course, if you were an Eldar and you looked at the Imperium, you would be like, no, we shouldn't give them anything. Because they're, like, crazy space bad guys. I mean, I was gonna say crazy space fascists, but they're not really fascists. You know, that's like a whole complicated thing. They're not technically bad, but you know they're bad. They're guys that are bad and genocidal and big, want to shoot stuff. So you don't want to just throw technology at them. You want to make it so that you can give them something that will help them grow. Give them something that will make their lives better. Give them stuff that will, like, oh hey, like, hey, this is what chaos is, this is how you can avoid it, this is how you can beat it, and you can do things like that. But you don't give all that stuff to someone like the Emperor, because the Emperor is ultimately a conquering warlord who wants nothing to do with any Xenos except for their subjugation. If you happen to be a Xeno species that he doesn't immediately deem as a threat, then yeah, sure, he'll probably let you, what, have like a little home world and stuff, and then like there's a couple of examples of that with certain species, but ultimately, like, that's not the way you want to live. If you're trying to exist in anywhere, you want to, like, you know, even if you didn't have any plans to move, suddenly having the barrier and making it so that you just cannot go somewhere else, that you are stuck being subservient to an empire that sees you as a second-class citizen, of course you're not going to be happy with that. And that's, of course, why the Eldar don't trust the Imperium. They have plenty of reason not to trust the Imperium. The Imperium is also given Chaos, you know, one of their biggest enemies, like, a ton of their best weapons. Like, Chaos Space Marines are some of the most devoted and scary forces dedicated to, like, you know, Slanesh and Nurgle and Khorne and all this stuff. Is that to say that, you know, you can't blame the Eldar for some of the things they have? No, you can still, there's definitely still some things out there that the Eldar have done that make it so that you can't just be like, oh hey, let's just give them everything and they're the best ever. But, like, all I'm saying is I can understand why, if you were like at Eldar and you saw the Imperium, you wouldn't want to immediately give stuff to the Imperium. You would look at it and be like, this is probably a bad thing to encourage. Now, eventually it just gets to a point where, like, hey, you're like one of our only real allies against Chaos here, and we can't really trust the Dark Eldar to be good, although they have better relations than, like, you might think they would. The Eldari and the Dark Eldar. But, ultimately, like, you can see a species that, like, maybe would have a really hard time taking that technology and putting it to use for something that wouldn't just, you know, be more war or be more issues. Or, you know, if you empower them, what happens if next thing you know, oh no, now the Imperium is just a leg up on us and they're just gonna blow up everything. But then you have some people like the Interrex. The Interrex had their own little space empire. They had the ability, they had advanced technology and things like that. They had the ability to function in society and know what chaos was, you know, also disproving that the Emperor, like the whole thing of the Emperor, like, no one can possibly know about this. Like, yeah, like eventually you could make the argument that all of this stuff is just I came in here for something I forgot immediately as I stepped in. That's fine. Saw. But eventually what you're kind of left with is this idea that, like, the Imperium is basically a net negative on all of society in the 41st millennium. And what we should do is have a better system or somewhere else for people to go. And that's why I make, like, my Rift Drakes the way I make them, where they're like technically inside the Imperium, but also technically not inside the Imperium. Because the Imperium is interesting as an idea. It has an aesthetic that is very appealing in certain ways. I like the Sisters of Battle, for instance. I like Space Marines. I think they look cool. And that kind of leads me to this desire to make a better version of them and make it so that there's more that I can use them for, and more that gives me a feeling of development and purpose. And, like, it's more than just main, kill, burn, because I don't know, I just ultimately, and especially as I've gotten older, the idea of just main, kill, burn just gets more and more boring. The idea of just destroying for destruction's sake, you know, is not that appealing. Sometimes there's moments where it can be really appealing, but in the long scheme, I want something more. I want to fight for a future. I want to make it so that, you know, even if the whole Imperium shatters, I want my Rift Drakes and their little mini Imperium that they have going on to do well. I want them to, you know, expand and be willing to fight for a future and be willing to do things so that people can have better lives. And that's what I'm really into, you know? And as I've changed and gotten older, that's kind of like more what I'm looking for in my fiction too. Because I used to really like a lot of just what I would call very dark fiction, where it was always very kind of morose, and everything about it was just very negative, and there's like all this darkness and everything goes bad. And like, but as I've gotten older and as I've experienced more, and as, you know, I've gotten more into things getting better, I just get less and less accommodating to this idea that like, oh man, grimdark is so cool. Like, and, you know, ultimately, if you like grimdark, that's great, man. I hope that people can enjoy their grimdark and do whatever they want with their stuff. I say if you want to do grimdark, that's fine. But for me personally, it's just not that appealing anymore. I want to do Warhammer with a little bit of light in it, you know, a little bit of that noble bright that everybody like kind of makes fun of. I like the idea of there being something worth saving in all of this. Because like in the current state of 40k, if you just read all of this and just take it for what it is on the surface level, I did not even notice that guy was up there till now. What? Oh, it's pinned him up there. Okay, that's okay. Don't worry, buddy. We'll get you down in just a second, and I'm sure you're already reincarnated into something better anyway. It's fine. But the idea that everything is just terrible forever is just not that interesting to me. It's just not very interesting to me to see everything go from, oh hey, we're building all this stuff, we're growing, and then, oh no, everything's bad, and then everything's bad, and then more bad. And what's interesting to me though is that, like, despite all that, I still love Warhammer 40k. I come back to it all the time. Like, even though there's been periods in my life where I'm kind of like, I don't know if I'm as into 40k right now. It's just so depressing. Excuse me, water. There's something about it which always draws me back in. It has this like rule of cool about things, which I think is just really interesting, and I really enjoy that. I really enjoy, like, just like at a certain point, like 40K, yeah, maybe it's silly, but it's like the style over substance stuff. That's great, and it's great to have that some of the style over substance stuff. It's great to have like the silly gothic cathedral spaceships and stuff like that. That's fun, man. It's great. I love it. I love the aesthetic. I also love that it looks so churchy because, you know, hey, me love me some Jesus and me love me some Makali and stuff like that. So of course I do. But it also leads me to be, as I'm always trying to find, like, hope. Where does this go? What can we do, excuse me, to make this... Oh my gosh, all I drank was a little bit of water, not hiccuping like, what? Crazy. There, destroy the hiccup with water and love. But, you know, like, I want to have a version of the future where there is some love and some mutual understanding, and there's more complicated drama than just, oh man, you're a Xenos and I'm a human, I'm gonna kill you. So it's like sometimes it's interesting to make it more complicated. And it's interesting to say, like, okay, wait, can these people live together? What do they have? What kind of concurrent values do they have? What are they willing to work for? Like, that's more interesting to me, man. So, like, I like to take all of these kind of crazy, all these crazy visuals and all these crazy things. Like, I love, like, Slanesh, for instance. Slanesh is one of my favorite Chaos Gods because ultimately I think, you know, you can kind of take, like, all this perversity and turn it into, like, more positive things. And I like doing that, and that's really fun. You know, or like Nurgle. Nurgle has, like, this kind of positive undertone to the whole thing, and I rather enjoy that. I also... You know, for me, one of the things that has given me a great deal of happiness in my life is just giving myself up to God. And, you know, I'm not going to go too crazy onto that right this moment, but when I play fantasy games or science fiction games, I kind of like being able to give myself up to a higher power. I like being a cleric. I like being a priest. I like being the kind of person that uses philosophy and meaning to inject games in our lives with more, you know? And I really enjoy that. But I also understand why some people are like, hey, you know, I'm not really as into that. Sometimes I just want to blow shit up. It's like, cool. But I think both of those 40Ks can exist concurrently with each other. Like, if you want more philosophy, if you want more stuff going on and more questions to be asked and stuff like that, I think that you can do it, and I think that you can really explore that. Or if you just want to go, no, everything's grim, and I want grim, and I want the war to go on, and I want, oh man, Xenos bad, I kill, stab. Fine, go ahead and do that. That is also perfectly fine. I think you can do both of those things and still make an interesting series, and still make stuff that is, like, ultimately worth engaging with. And that's what really kind of gets me going, man, is like for instance, my Rift Drakes, my Space Marine chapter, they work with the Eldari, and that gives them access to technology that they normally would never have. And just, like, being able to, like, make the lives of people around them better gives them this power. And then, you know, you have, like, complications that come from that, because now you can manipulate people to certain ends, because you can take the things that people are giving you and you can explore with them, and you can do new things with them. Because the Eldari have had this technology for millions of years. Maybe you can take it and do something neat and interesting with it. And it's like, okay, so cool. So they have, like, a higher level technology, but they use it specifically to, you know, make sure they maintain control. Like, by making people's lives easier, they make it so that people are willing to, you know, kind of go with what their plans are and stuff like that. And I think that's interesting. Or you can take chaos and you can make it into something that's more amenable towards more people. And I think that chaos as it is, like, just presented flat lore wise, is kind of it's kind of weird to me that almost anybody would fall to it. I guess the ultimate reason that people fall to it so easily is that if you stop and like look at their situation, it's like, oh hey, what do I get? I get to be in the Imperium, and I get to live with all this stuff that's miserable forever. Oh boy, factory forever. Or I can take this one opportunity to be, you know, free, or at least freer, and go from there. Stuff like that. And actually have something that's, you know, worth fighting for, and have something that's, you know, maybe it's not that great overall for some people, but having the ability to actually have a goal that's worth fighting for, and have the goal that's worth pursuing, is something that I think it makes it much more interesting. Like having those human conflicts in there. It's making it so it's not all just dumb bolter porn. And I get it, a lot of people like the bolter porn, man. Nothing wrong with that, I guess, but it's just not as interesting to me. Like, I've read so many of the Horus Heresy books, for instance, and I rather enjoy some parts of them, but then there's other parts of them where it's just like, wow, this is just like very stupid, just violence for violence sake. It's just nightmarish oppression and nightmares for no other reason than like you know, random chance, random reason is like, oh yeah, like I have a bolt gun and you have a bolt gun, we're gonna shoot each other. But I think that taking like human drama and making it like more like the center of like the 40K storylines is just infinitely more interesting. You take it and you like, oh, this person wants to feed their family and they're willing to go through all this bullshit to do it. That's interesting. That's kind of crazy. Or like, you know, even approaching just like the Imperial middle class, like the people in the Imperium who are just kind of like, you know, middle class and don't really feel the need to like be upper class or whatever, and just kind of want to live. Like on certain worlds, that is a thing. Like there are certain worlds where people's lives are fairly basic and they just go about, do their job and do that sort of thing. But you can use worlds like that to make it more interesting. You can also use that to, like, if you even want to explore the horror tropes of 40K, you can use that to go into how like horrible it is that the few people who do have a decent life in the Imperium are now like being forced to like go through all of this crazy stuff to make sure that, you know, they survive. Like take an Imperial, like somebody who works in the Imperial Governor's Mansion who just wants to you know, boom, who just wants to like maybe make it so that their daughter can get a better education, or make it so that someone down the line they can get better lives for their future family members and stuff like that. It's like, that's interesting to me. That's like someone who doesn't immediately buy into the propaganda but just kind of accepts it and like nods with it. Because I mean, I don't know if you've ever done this, but you walk around and there's plenty of places where there's like propaganda and like ideas are like manipulated by people, but in a lot of cases people don't actually believe it. They just kind of go, yeah, well, we don't raise an issue because if the authorities find out, then they'll get mad at us. Or in other cases you'll find that sometimes with conspiracies no one really cares, and like even if you found out, they're just gonna be like, okay, well, whatever. So like the idea that like you could just be in all way over your head as like this Imperial citizen who like just wants to like make ends meet, just wants to like have their family be like okay, or like defend their planet, or you know, just like do something that you think is honorable, and then like the world comes crashing in around you and everything goes bad. Like, oh, you're just like this average governor's like assistant somewhere in the mansion. This mansion is huge. They never see you. You don't even know what the governor really looks like because you've never seen them up close. And then boom, Tyranid invasion. Now you have to defend yourself. Now you have to defend your family. Now you have to defend everything that's going on. I think that's more interesting. Like, now they have something to fight and die for. When they look at it and they're like, oh, hey, I need to defend this. I don't want my family to have, you know, go through these difficulties. I don't want my family to die. That, to me, is just a better story, right? Like, that is ultimately the thing that, oh my goodness. That's a lot of blood. That is ultimately the thing that I think makes it so much more interesting. Like taking Warhammer and all this craziness and then just adding these human elements to it, like really human elements. Oh. But that's okay. But, you know, adding really human elements to it, like, or like having a Space Marine that maybe just has some doubts. You know, for instance, like, have a Space Marine that just kind of... It's not that he's like, oh man, I'm gonna give myself to chaos or anything like that. It's more just that, like, if this is what the Imperium is, why are we fighting for this? I want there to be questions. I want there to be people who are willing to, like, ask, what are we supposed to be doing and why are we supposed to be doing it? I want it to make sense that occasionally a Space Marine would just be like, has to give themselves a pep talk. Like, you know, and as silly as that might sound, just like, you know, it would be really interesting to see just like one of these superhuman, basically child soldiers having to stop and just go, okay, I have to do this. I have to do this for the Imperium. I have to do this to make sure that everything is going okay. I've given up everything. I already can't just like go have like a normal wife and kids or whatever. Or, you know, if we're being really spicy, husband and kids, hey. But, you can't do that sort of stuff. You gotta give up all your life and strive forward to try and, like, you know, kill and, like, make your entire life about nothing but murder. It's just like, is that as interesting as, like, this, like is it as interesting if they're just a murder hobo just running around killing people? No, I think it's much more interesting if there's like this idea that like a Space Marine understands that there's something that's worth fighting for. It understands that, like, yeah, even if the Imperium isn't the best right now, it's the only option humanity has or something like that. Or like, you know, hey, I don't have the ability to just like stop and make a new thing. I don't have the ability to like remove the 10,000 years of oppression and evil that the Imperium has. And like, honestly, a lot of people don't even have the time to really think about it. It's like everything's going so quick, so fast all the time that they don't really have the time to appreciate it. And, you know, that's like one of the things you think about with real life, is that sometimes you just don't have the time to sit down and really think about your situation. Think about, like, hey, where's this going? Why is this going where it's going? Did I do this? Did I mess up? Or was it something around me that made me do this? What, you know, like, trying to develop as a person, like, that's much more interesting to me. It's like, actually one of the reasons that, like, Warhammer novels are both great and terrible, because the really good Warhammer novels really know how to make characters that you really want to dive into and learn more about, and, like, you want to just know what happens to their struggles. Are they gonna get that little bit further? And stuff like that. Like, I rather like the couple that comes up in the Night Lords trilogy. I think just making the best of a bad situation and realizing that the Imperium isn't great, but obviously the Night Lords are not, like, you know, a godsend or something like that, is pretty neat. And just like trying to understand and make the best of where you're at just seems to me like it would be an interesting story for like a Space Marine to be like going through, or just, you know, like an Imperial citizen, or even an Eldar. Maybe an Eldar just wakes up and just kind of looks around at their life and they're just kind of like, what is this? Why am I bothering to live so long? Why am I bothering to do all these things? There has to be a greater purpose to all of this. And, you know, really questioning themselves and questioning the society around them. I think that would be really kind of cool. And, I mean, that's the kind of stories I kind of want to make. Like, with my own Slaanesh warband, the idea is mostly that I kind of got this idea from a variety of sources, but I was reading a lot of the Fabius Bile books, and one of the things that occurred to me is that one of the things that they really want is brotherhood. They really want the ability to kind of go back to the way things were. And I think that's part of the problem with the mindset that so many people in the Imperium and just in general have, is that they want to go back to the way things were, not to push forward to a new reality. They don't want to like go forward and make something new and decent. They want to abandon it and go for something simplistic instead. And I think that's why you get something. I think it's much more interesting when you have the ability to understand that you can go. You don't have to go just to the past. You don't have to just like look around and go, the Imperium was so great. It's like, it really wasn't. The Eldari Empire was so great. It really wasn't for a lot of people. It's like, yeah, explaining that and explaining that, like, how much further along things could be, and explaining that, like, it's your own beliefs and things that are dragging you down is kind of an interesting prospect to me. Like, the idea of, like, approaching all this stuff and also approaching it and being like, hey, we want brotherhood. So what I did was I made a Slaanesh warband, and they are a Slaanesh warband that has an excess of brotherhood. They want to reunite. They want to like make a family among the stars. And as crazy as that might sound, it's like, well, what other options do you have? Do you really want to live the rest of your life like constantly looking over your shoulder to make sure that no one's about to stab you in the back? Do you really want to have like the entire like cosmos out to get you and have no one there with you? I don't think so. I think you would want someone to be there with you. I think you would want someone who you can rely on. And it's like, oh, well, no, they can't ever trust each other ever. It's like, well, then how are they functioning? How are they functioning on a basic level? They can't trust anybody. Like, taking the chaos stuff and making it so that they can have an element of growth and an element of taking bad stuff and making it good is just much more interesting to me. And I think that that's part of the reason I really enjoy like these ideas, is that you can take something that is so innocuous, so simple and silly, like, oh, I want an excess of brotherhood, and turn it into something that's fun. Like, that's part of the fun of Warhammer 40k, is that you can take these simple, silly things and make them more. You can make them develop into something greater, and that's what I like about 40k, is that you have all this room for development. Now, the thing is that the plot lines of 40k tend to be kind of singular in nature, and they tend to kind of go about in certain patterns. But ultimately, I think you can advance beyond those things and you can make better stuff. I mean, like, other science fiction might be what you might call better for showing hope and stuff like that, but I think that part of the unique advantage of 40k is actually how grimdark it is. Because of how grimdark it is, you can take the elements that you want and you can shine a light on them. You can make it so that there's things for growth, and there's things for people to go through and fight for and stuff like that, and like make it so that, oh wow, things are bad right now, but we can definitely make them better in the... Don't you make those noises at me, Mr. Chair. But we can definitely make them better for each other. We can make it so that, you know, in the Imperium, yeah, my life sucks and everything sucks around me, but what if we pushed forward and did something better? What if we grew as, like, a nation, as, like, a state, as a planet, as a system, as a species? And these higher ideals are something that I think are worth, A, fighting for, and B, they're worth, like, sharing. Like, the idea of, like, hey, let's at least try to make the best of the situation that we're in is interesting to me. Not just going immediately like, oh man, everything's bad, people have fallen, oh man, sin, badness, blah 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 blah. No. The idea is that we have the ability to do redemption. That the people who are making things worse have chosen to make things worse, have chosen to give themselves over to nihilism and destruction. What we really want more is people who are willing to fight for something that is good, who are willing to fight for something that is worthwhile. And, like, that is true in real life, but it also just makes more interesting stories. Like, you don't have to fight for something that's quote-unquote good, I think, but I think that understanding that there's things that you should be willing to fight for, and that there's things that make stakes and values matter is overall... Okay, I thought I spilled that for a second. Is overall a more interesting way to tell stories than to just be like, oh, everyone's depressed if they're like in the traitor legions and just given into debauchery and there's nothing better about them. This is all it is forever and ever. Versus, oh, they found multiple. That probably wasn't good for them. But like, you can actually take all this stuff and kind of grow with it. And kind of make it so that things get better for people. I like it when my stories make it seem like, you know, there is a chance for change and a potential for change. When you like read a Warhammer story, if you ever get the impression like, oh well, they're not going to do anything because this is the character that's too important to die. It's like sometimes those books can be good as character studies, but you know, you want something more interesting to go with it. And sometimes like the ability to fight and die and to be willing to fight for change in all of these scenarios is, I personally think, just much more interesting. And if it's like Eldari doing it, if it's humans doing it, whatever, whoever's doing it, I think that makes for interesting characters. So that begs the question, what is worth fighting for? And I think that, for instance, I love my interplanetary conglomerate. Interesting. No, it didn't break. Sturdy cup. And, you know, going through and being willing to share those ideas and grow with those ideas is something that I personally find rather pleasant and enjoyable. Going through and taking all of the dark elements of 40k and using them as the ability for someone to jump off and try to build something better. Like the biggest problem with 40k for the people in it, like obviously this is just like a narrative thing, so it's fine, but like people just don't want to make new things. They want to embrace the old. They want to do what has always been there. And sometimes you just need like a real type of go-getter type person. Do I need like a stool or something? Get up there. Okay, maybe not. Oh, that's a lot of goop. Goop. But being able to like form these better ideas, being able to like, okay, we have 10,000 years of history. What can we do with it? What can we do with all this stuff we've learned? What can we do with this stuff that's happened? What can we do by analyzing history and learning not to repeat the mistakes of the past, etc.? And like, I understand that the way 40k is, like, you want to make it like kind of a sort of grim, dark setting and make it so that things are bad and people like that. I understand that to a certain extent, but like, I will defeat your game with your own physics, because I'm cool like that. And being able to like take that and like look around and go like, hey, this isn't worth fighting for, let's go make something new. Like, I like, part of the reason I like the ghoul stars are one of my favorite areas in 40k is because, yeah, they're less inhabited because of all the bad stuff that's in there, but they're also a place where you can be a little bit more independent and gonna go out and spread your wings a little bit and maybe find a way to build up something that you want rather than just, you know, accepting what surrounds you. Like, really engravings give no tactical advantage whatsoever. That is very true, and I can tell you that because I personally am a cat who is also a what you call it, Revolver Ocelot. You should make sure that you don't like. Actually, you know, I think that's one of the things about 40K. I like silly stuff like the engravings and the kind of crazy junk that goes along with that. But I would also kind of prefer if sometimes people didn't just have like a bunch of random skulls glued to like literally everything, because I think people love random skulls. Boop. Hello. And then we're going to burn the corpse so that no one will find them, because if everybody knows that there's horrible aliens, we might have to censor them. But yeah, I like the idea of being able to grow. I like the idea of being able to take these characters, put them in the human situations and all this stuff. It's one of the reasons why I kind of want to like introduce more stories with an actual romance and like stuff like that. And like, I do think that some people do like simplistic stories, and there's nothing wrong with like a simplistic narrative occasionally. But I want something that's more complicated. I want characters that are more, that feel more real, feel more like a person who like endures things. Like a big problem with the 40K setting in general is that it kind of a lot of times operates on the assumption that, oh, you grew up on this in this kind of environment, therefore this is what you're going to be. It's like, I mean, I guess there's like a little bit of that in reality, but people do change and people do have a tendency to be more cheery or like have like whole lives to them and have reasons for like appreciating the things they appreciate. That works. And stuff like that. And what you really want more than anything is characters that you can relate to, and then you can use that as a jumping off point to make more interesting stuff. Dang it! Meat chunk! Bucket! Go! I'm very glad I didn't spill that. But, you know, you also have things where, like, it becomes more and more obvious over time that people don't really know, like, what they're going for. And so sometimes you read 40K fiction and it starts to just feel like it's just a bunch of dudes in power armor punching each other. It's like, yeah, you know, if you like that, that's perfectly fine. But I think we can just make it better. I think we can have characters that feel like they're actual people in like a difficult situation, as opposed to just, you know, it's a guy in power armor, who cares, you know. Fire. Fire is good. And I like it like you should. And I think it's also part of what makes the Primarch so interesting is that for some of them, basically, like, because all this stuff I'm talking about, like, with human problems stuff, like, part of the reason I like Lorgar so much is because Lorgar feels to me the most human of the Primarchs. He feels like a character. He feels like someone who's hasn't just accepted everything around him and is like actually questioning things and is trying to figure out how the world works and isn't just like accepting whatever is being told to him. But also not, you know, immediately going forth into the element of making excuses for everything. It's actually kind of interesting because Lorgar is kind of an embodiment of a lot of things I like the idea that he's trying to make it so that people's lives are better, and then he's trying to make it so that the Imperium is better, and ultimately what he really gets censored for isn't really the religious stuff at all. It's kind of the excuse they use, but the real truth is that he's just falling behind. He's not conquering worlds fast enough. The Emperor is impatient. He needs these worlds conquered faster. He needs these resources done faster. He needs all of this stuff taken care of faster, so that he can do what he wants to do. Lorgar, on the other hand, wants to create an Imperium where people have a reason to live and they have a bright future and they have things to look forward to, at least originally. And he just sees this as the truth. He sees this as what he has seen in his visions, is what makes sense to him. And that's a more interesting dynamic than just, oh, daddy didn't love me enough, so I want to, rebel against him. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, I also understand that as a motivator. And that is also still a very human, excuse me, sorry. That is also still a very human motivator. But being able to see and have the stuff where, we can see that there is something that is worth pursuing. There is something that is worth going after. There is something that is worth, chasing in all of this. And that the vision of the Imperium that the Emperor actually wants, like this kind of like febrile, everything is the same, everything is built for purpose rather than like aesthetic beauty and stuff like that, and then taking like the most beautiful things and like only keeping them for like the most important people, is like, no, that's not worth it. You gotta give people something. You gotta make it feel like they're actually going for something that makes it worthwhile. The Imperium needs to feel like it's a better case. And a lot of the people, if you read the Horus Heresy books, a lot of the people who get on side of the Imperium or go with the Imperium are the people who like would benefit from it, just like financially or politically or something like that. They're not really looking for the more complex type of things. They're just looking for like a reality that makes sense to them, a reality that is going to give them more objects, and often it's just material. The material element of life is often ignored, and it's like, well, it's not just that people are greedy, but like, being able to give people lots of wealth or lots of the ability to do something is, is worth doing. Wait, why am I doing it this way instead of just grabbing a big bucket and putting them all in there? It's worth doing these sorts of things. Like, when you find that everything around you is not worth propping up, why would you continue to prop it up? If you find that everything around you is basically built just to make you suffer, it's like, well, you kind of have these two options. One is to sort of accept it and just try to do the absolute best you can, accept that this is the world we live in, and that these are the things that are like happening. But to me, it makes much more sense to be like, no, I want to change this. I want to forge something and make it my own. I want to try and make it so that someone really can have a better future because of me. That to me seems like it's something that is so much more, not only just interesting from a character perspective, but also good as a motivator in life. Like, seeing that you can change something, that you can make a difference, can really and truly take tasks that feel pointless and boring, and takes a life that might feel pointless and boring, and really give it new purpose and meaning. And maybe you don't do things even that differently, but just the feeling of it being different can make so much, can be so important to people, Sometimes it's like, in a setting like 40K, you just want to be able to throw a little bit of light in there. You want to be able to throw a little bit of hope, a little bit of motivation to get people going. Not I mean, Jimmy Dean. Sometimes you have to be willing to overcome obstacles in your life. Sometimes you have to be willing to not just stagnate in things that are terrible, and you have to be willing to change and develop and grow. But I don't know, maybe all that is just me. I just feel like we can grow so much as a people, as a population, as groups when we really put our mind to it and really try to form something better. And I think that 40K is a kind of a fun setting to explore those ideas. It's a fun setting to be like, okay, look, everything is written to be so grim, dark, and miserable. Where's the tenacity of the human spirit that comes up and like kind of overcomes some of that? You know, that's what I'm interested in. That's what I want to see. And I think that that's kind of like where a lot of the good stuff really comes into play. What is this? The hell is going on? One player after another is turning up dead, and I can hardly cope with the situation. It's just... that's kind of crazy. Yeah, it's all a big reference to the thing. I think it's one of my favorite stories where, like, a group of people could probably do at least a little bit better if they could just, you know, have a way to cooperate and hang out, but they end up not doing that because they want, because they're too paranoid. And it's like, that's kind of the thing, is like, I want a world in which humanity's better nature can override the paranoia. And yeah, you know, I understand that, Lone Wolf Mercenary. There's a lot of 40K stuff out there, man. There's way too much stuff for you to be having easy time just being like, hey, here's my vast in-depth opinion on all these things. It's like, I have this stuff, but that's just because I'm crazy and spend way too much time reading way too much 40K lore, and for one reason or another, it's one of my obsessions. Similar to Aliens or Halo or Star Wars or a bunch of other things. There's a bunch of things I get obsessed over, so I just kind of sit there and think about them for a really long time. This is just kind of the way I approach life in general, right? Like, when I write, like, my own characters for my fan fiction, basically, because that's what it really is, you know, like making your own chapter and stuff like that, it's fan fiction. Or make my own orc warband or my own chaos warband. It's all fan fiction. And for that stuff, I just want to write things that appeal to me, and I just want there to be a reason to continue with it. I don't know, I just never found the whole thing about everything being so dark all that appealing. Now, what I will say too is if you just want to make some comments, man, go ahead. I will engage with them as I see them. I'm just here to ramble about 40K lore. That's one of my favorite things to do, is just to ramble about 40K lore, to ramble in general. I have a mind that doesn't ever stop. It just is always going through stuff and always throwing out new ideas and stuff like that. Some of them are very dumb. You can definitely ask my girlfriend about that. She'll say that sometimes I come up with very dumb ideas, but you know, for me personally, I just really enjoy being able to explore characters and things like that. I enjoy being able to look at characters and try to figure out what's actually motivating them other than just a story. It's one of the things that can make it so that the characters in a book don't just feel like they're quote-unquote written, they feel like they're actual people. They feel like there's something to engage with there. That's what I personally like. I like being able to... I just like putting dynamite in this thing, actually. That is one thing I like. I like being able to see them develop and, like, get a feeling for who they are. That's why certain Primarchs were just never very interesting to me. Like, Ferrus Manus just never really felt like much of a character. And, you know, one of the things that kind of... explosives. One of the things that always kind of got into me is like the hypocrisy of some of the things he does and the statements and like that, and just being like so up your own butt that you don't recognize when like, oh, meat chunks, that you don't recognize when things are like going a certain way, or that you don't recognize that like things around you are changing, and like you're part of the problem. It's like you meet people like that are just kind of dense and don't seem to understand that, like, hey, a lot of the issues that you are currently dealing with have a lot to do with the way you're approaching them and your own self. Oh, meaty bit. I don't even know what that is. You know, so, like, you need to, like, take the time to be able to develop and be willing to take criticism and be willing to do these things. But I think a lot of the Primarchs just aren't willing to do that. A lot of them are just, like, really kind of stuck up their own butts and only really want to, like, form a particular society around themselves. Yeah, I understand. I understand how that works. Don't worry, that's why there's weird nerds online like me to know all the lore for you and to throw random bits of bullshit at you occasionally and be like, haha, would you like to learn lore? And you'll be like, not particularly, and I'll be like, haha, too bad. But you know, that's some of the fun stuff with all of this too, is that, like, part of the reason I like 40k as much as I do is because there's so much of it to absorb that I can always, like, go find something new and weird in the story and find new strange things to appreciate and new strange things to, like, kind of understand and try to figure out how they all make sense together, you know? And there's stuff like that where sometimes you just have to be willing to just dive in a little bit and just kind of snoop around through a lot of crazy stuff to find the neat stuff. I mean, like, look, ultimately for me, a lot of the stuff that's much more interesting about Warhammer and all this other stuff is the way characters interact, the way when you have humans interacting and stuff like that. That's cool. Just telling me, oh no, there's a gigantic robot that's bigger than ever, but it's big, and the gun is so big that it's going to destroy everything. Wow, crazy, but the orcs are going to take it over. It's fine, but, like, that's not, like, the main thing that interests me as much, you know? I just, like, oh hey, look, flares. I should probably get rid of these flares. I don't think I'm supposed to leave them here. I think that's part of the detritus that I'm supposed to be cleaning up. But, you know, sometimes it's just like, sometimes when you read a 40k book, it kind of feels like they're writing characters and they're just, like, cutting dudes out of cardboard. I do know other 40kers and Necron fans playing a couple of... Necrons are interesting. Necrons are probably, like, one of my favorite, like, concepts. Like, when they explore them well, they're really fun. Like, the idea of this civilization that has existed for so long and now time is just not really a thing for them, so they kind of, you know, can take as long as they want on petty nonsense is pretty interesting to me. And, like, the idea that you can just kind of exist in a plethora of, like, weird worlds and move around doing whatever you want, that's neat. I like that, I think. Oh, hey, what's this? Oh, it's another flare! Oh, Lord. Man, they have a lot of flares out here. I mean, I guess it makes sense. Or, like, the idea that, like, it's the Necrons, you can kind of make a dynasty however you want to make them. Like, for my own little personal Necron dynasty where I was, itchy. And I need a drink of water. The idea I was working with was more that they're, like, gardeners almost, so they kind of, like, my Necron dynasty, like, defends a planet, or several planets in, like, a whole system, just so that they can, kind of watch them grow and kind of watch what they do and just see what they do with, like, different little things. They'll, like, occasionally introduce stuff into the environment to make people kind of question it and stuff like that, or to make it so that, like, these guys inadvertently think that the maybe inadvertently or maybe advertently think that the Necrons are actually, like, the Emperor's angels and things like that. And that's, like, one of my favorite kind of ideas, is the idea that this Necron group just wants to create a scenario in which they're just basically able to watch people live their lives and just kind of observe it and just find it kind of fascinating. And there's also the whole idea of like, well, in the future, maybe we can do biotransference and these can be our new bodies, so we should learn as much about them as possible. And, you know, while all that stuff is going on, you know, explosion. And while all that stuff is going on, you also have like these Necrons that maybe start to feel more connected to the humans and want to like get a little bit closer to their weird society and poke at them and go, hey, what are you doing? You know, stuff like that. I think that's a pretty interesting way to go about it. But I mean, I don't know, that's just the way I write my stuff, is to make it so that it's interesting to me in particular. In terms of like actual dynasties, I don't actually know that much about specific Necron dynasties, though. I know a decent bit about well, that's neat. I know a decent bit about like Necrons, like in their overarching lore. I don't know specific things about like depending on how deep you want to get into it, there's like certain things that I don't know as well as others. I kind of like the idea of like this Necron's just like watching and like absorbing another species culture a little bit and just kind of engaging with them, but ultimately still being like the ones that are like kind of pulling all the strings and, you know, explosion, like making sure that people get to enjoy all of this stuff and things like that. But I think one of the things that becomes more difficult with that is eventually you kind of get to the idea like how much can you relate to a species that is entirely not your own. And honestly, I think with the way the Necrons are and the way the humans are, they can probably relate to each other pretty well in a lot of ways, at least from like a base level, you know. They both have a lot of similar things and a lot of similar problems, and all the Necrons that exist now, like they can kind of like, well, all the ones that still have personalities and stuff, they can kind of go through this whole process of experiencing huge quantities of time without like having to deal with any of the deleterious effects of it. Or well, at least not as many at least not as many deleterious effects of it. And that makes it kind of interesting when they are just kind of these fish out of water, these like old men who are just kind of like fighting over nothing and all this kind of crazy stuff. That's a lot of fun to me. And like using, or like the idea of them just like giving random bits of Necron tier technology to these humans that are like, in a sense, so beneath them that they have absolutely no idea why they're doing what they're doing or what the thing is really for, but they just kind of start to like, eventually maybe they have to like explain it to them a little bit and like kind of let them figure it out, and just like, okay, here, this is levitation technology, what are they gonna do with it? You know, are they gonna make cool new vehicles, or are they gonna, you know, ram into a wall and explode? There's a lot of different things that they could do, and I like the idea of being able to go into it and approach with that kind of vibe. You know, stuff like that I do appreciate. 1 second. Give me just 1 second, please. I just want to send somebody a message. Streaming. I'm streaming. I'm a big streamy cat. But that's okay. But, you know, That's another thing, is I like every faction in 40k at least a little bit. There are certain factions I like and I think about a lot more than others. But, ultimately, I think, you know, there's a few that I always return to and always revisit. Like, the Orcs, for instance, are one of my absolute favorites because they're just silly and fun. And I like that. I like being able to take some silly and ramming it into that darkness and being like, "Ah, silly. Fear me, for I have the ability to laugh at you," and go, "Honk, honk." And they all go, "Oh no, you laugh. Don't laugh at me." And I go, "Yes. Yes, I laugh. You can escape me." And the next thing you know, I'm a cat. Well, I mean, I was always a cat, but now we're even more cat. And, you know, it's sometimes you just, like, go in there and you're just like, "Oh, no! Somebody is stopping me!" But the Necrons are probably one of those factions that I really think deserve more books, more exploration, and more stuff like that. And I just kind of like the idea of them not being, like, evil either. Like, I know that some people miss the old, like, "Oh man, they're just space terminators. All they do is seek out to kill." And it's like, I know some people really like that, but for me personally, I like the idea more of like Necrons like interacting with people and being like, "What? Why do you do that? Why are you like this? Why are you so silly-billy?" You know, stuff like that. As opposed to... Oh. Oh yeah, I remember that story. Yeah, the one where it's like this I don't know if it's the exact same one I'm thinking of, but there was this one where like the Necrons don't really bother oh, flare. Fire is pretty. Yeah, like they like bring like the baby to meet the Necron, and she was like in stasis basically for a long time, and then like save them or something like that, or like a good, oh, they thought of her as like a good omen, and you know, just like trying to come to terms with that understanding. See, I love stuff like that. I love, oh hey, excuse me, whip, big claw. I love stuff like that, and I love the ability to something the exile. Unsure. Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. I rather like that one. I like it when there's stories like that where like humans and Necrons interact and they're just having a nice time. Like the idea of this Necron just being like kind of bored and just deciding to go in on something like that and just like, yeah, you know, I'll hang out with you and be your friend and things like that. You know, that's pretty cool, I think. Or, you know, just kind of like just seeing, like, why not? What do you have to lose? There's no reason not to indulge them a little bit. You have nothing but time. You don't have to do anything. You were literally just sitting there for like eons, just hanging out, and now people are coming and talking to you and trying to show you their stuff and all that. That is really neat. I like that stuff. That's part of what I think makes the Necron such a good avenue for storytelling when you do them right. Like the idea that they could just kind of experience eons and eons and never really have to come to terms with their own mortality, but also can kind of come to terms with the mortality of everyone around them and like how they deal with the situation that they're placed in, and like what it means to be a Necron at this point. Like, is it worth fighting over? Is it worth getting all these different things going on? It's like, no. I think it's worth just exploring and just chilling. I mean, if I was the Necron tier, one of the first things I would probably do is just contact the Eldar and be like, hey, look, I don't want to fight your people. I don't want to make an issue. All of this happened millions of years ago. I don't have any interest in keeping this going. And then, like, you know, I think a lot of Eldar would probably just be like, okay. Well, I think if they're smart enough, they'd probably think there's like a trick or something, but then if you could just show them that you have no actual ill intention. What is this? She really was sitting in the middle of the winter and the two kids... Oh yeah, she used her stasis field to protect them from the winter. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that was really cool. I really like that story. Just like little acts of kindness and stuff like that. I don't know. I like living in a world where people do random acts of kindness and randomly try to help each other out and do this stuff where they're willing to, you know, help one another and go out of their way to do a little thing. And, you know, even in that case, it wasn't really going that much out of the way. It was just this little bit that managed to save their lives, and, you know, they really appreciated it. They wanted to show her their baby, and she seemed to kind of appreciate it. Like, all that stuff was neat. And I like stuff like that. I like the idea of the Necrons, like I said, like my dynasty has this whole I guess it is like she is kind of does it more accidentally, but even then, like even an accidental act of kindness is still, you know, it's really nice. It's really good to see that occasionally, and really good to see that not every bit of a story has to be terrible people doing terrible things. You know, sometimes just seeing a little bit of development and seeing a little bit of warmth, even if it comes from something like a Necron, is, you know, I think really quite cool. And I rather enjoy seeing stuff like that. I think I've gotten most of the stuff from down here. I don't know what the sound is. That doesn't sound that great, but it's okay. Yeah, but like, the idea of her trying to push people away and then like they end up becoming closer to her anyway is, you know, really kind of heartwarming in a way. And I rather enjoy that. Whoop. I think I've gotten most of the stuff down here, so that's good. But yeah, or like an Eldari that wants to mentor a human and just see like where it goes, or like an Eldari who isn't constantly like, we're so superior to you, and instead is like, you know, willing to like sit there and deal with someone and like experience some of their hubris and things like that. Explosions. And that's really neat. Or like I've also thought of like orcs that are willing to kind of like not fight somebody just because it wouldn't really be worth the proper scrap. And then over time kind of ends up taking care of them and doing his best. Like the idea of like this random orc commando basically stumbling upon a human village and at first just kind of hiding out and taking food from them, and then over time kind of almost becoming part of the village. Dying. I do like the salamanders quite a bit. I like the salamanders as the nice good boys of something. They'll go out of their way to help you out, and they'll go out of their way to try to make your life better. They'll go out of their way to save civilians. I like that. That's one of the things I definitely aspire to have as like part of the lore of my own chapter, is that they are, you know, helpful and that they're willing to use their superhuman strength and stuff like that to protect people and become defenders of humanity in all of its forms, and realize, you know, the complications that come from their own situation, and also making it just better in general. You know, I think that's really cool and really neat. And being able, excuse me, hey. And being able to see the salamanders with all their love of fire and stuff like that, like this idea that like the fire can burn away iniquity and come back as like, you know, justice, but you know, fire kind of like the phoenix can make it worthwhile and make it so that things are better for people is really interesting to me. And really being able to, you know, kind of hone in on that, the idea of like every Marine is like kind of their own forge master in a way, and that's part of what like defines them, is very interesting to me. Like they all have, I mean, you could call it a hobby, but it's also like this like element of creation that they engage in that makes it so that they are more human, and just even in that way, just like engaging creation, engaging in like something that feels worthwhile and building something that is worthwhile is pretty neat, I think. Oh my goodness, there's so much junk on the ground. We're gonna throw it in the fire and burn it all down. And that's like one of the really fun things about a lot of this stuff, is that you can occasionally see that real humanity shine through. Oh my goodness. Excuse me. Okay, I should be able to... This is like a dentist drill. And being able to build a path forward. I see, that's part of the reason I like the salamanders, because I think they do believe in the future of humanity in a way. They're kind of dealing with what they've found themselves in, but they really kind of embody like the goodness of mankind in so many different ways, and their ability to overcome and do so much better. Now, of course, there's also some instances where they don't do that, but you know, Vulcan is easily in my top 5 Primarchs. I mean, I have like a top 4 Primarchs really, where it's like Lorgar, Alfarius, Jagatai Khan, and Vulcan. I literally just said his name, and then also my brain was like, no, you don't remember. But I do love being able to see those guys and see like where they are and what they've come to and why they've come to be where they are. I think that's all very interesting and neat. Ah. Okay. So most of the stuff down here, I think, is taken care of. I wonder if I'm supposed to do anything with these. You know, I have a melt gun. I just want to see if I can melt this ice. But the salamanders going out of their way to be cool guys is just something that I really appreciate and I wish people did more often. Especially in fiction. Okay. Wait, I came back up here to get the... Where's the laser thing? I just want to see if this works. Big man with a broken gene seed. What's his name? Broken gene seed. I don't know. I'm not actually 100% sure who you're talking about. Is it a salamander or is it just like Primarch? Yeah, because Magnus the Red is kind of a broken gene seed. Everybody mutates in the Thousand Suns. Or, well, not everybody, but a lot of people mutate in the Thousand Suns. Hmm. Dang it. I mean... Sanguinius also has kind of a broken gene seed because he has the Black Rage and the Red Thirst and all that. The desire to drink the blood of their enemies, and then the Black Rage is like basically PTSD, where they all like, or well, some of them will occasionally give into the Black Rage and they feel like they are on the ship watching Sanguinius being slain by Horus. And when that's going on, that's when, you know, they've succumbed to the Black Rage, is what they say. Because then, like, you know, it's supposed to be really difficult. It is also like 2 a.m. That is very fair. Brain no always work great. Sometimes brain go, other times brain go, huh? And sometimes I go, meh. But it is what it is. But yeah, I really enjoy the salamanders. But speaking of it being 2 a.m. for you and it's midnight for me now, I should probably get ready to head back to bed. I just wanted to stream for a little bit and chat for a little bit. I really appreciate you coming and hanging out. Brain went missing like Vulcan. Yeah. Vulcan does go missing sometimes. Lower than the recommended level. But yeah, it is getting pretty late, and so I should probably chillax. Honestly, what I might do, though, is I might just stop streaming for a little bit, take a little break, and then maybe get a game of 40k in. Because, you know, why not? I was almost considering just streaming a game of 40k. But, only thing about that is that you don't necessarily want to, like, stream if somebody else doesn't want to stream, you know what I mean? Anyway. Oh, hey, a helmet. I had a helmet in there. Hello, helmet. Are you my friend, Mr. Helmet? The helmet says yes. Okay. Anyway, I really appreciate it that folks stopped by and checked it out. I hope that you guys enjoyed my rambling stream for a little bit. I'll have to do it a little bit earlier. Which... Oh, a game of 40k? I mean, like, actual tabletop 40k. Probably gonna play Chaos Space Marines or Orcs, but I might also try out Necrons, because when we were talking about the Necron story earlier now, I wanted to, There is also Dark Tide. I might do a little bit of Dark Tide. But I was like doing like an actual tabletop game of 40k. That one's pretty good. At least I rather enjoy Dark Tide. Dark Tide's pretty great. I might have to stream some of that sometime. But anyway, for right now, I'm gonna go ahead and call it an evening. Thanks so much for stopping by, everybody, and I hope that you all have an absolutely wonderful evening. And I hope that you know that I love you and God loves you and Papa I love you. Bye. Bye. Have a great time. Bye. And bye. Oh wait, that doesn't stop streaming. Oh God, I'm still here. Don't judge me. And now we